Good evening, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Wanted to hop on tonight, talk to everybody again about this Social Security scam. And basically what I want to explain to everybody is the Social Security Act itself is a cooperative agreement. It's a cooperative agreement between the federal government and each state. And when we talk about a cooperative agreement, we're talking about something where a one party is given a reward for performing certain functions. And in regards to the states, what happens here is you go to the hospital and you're going to have a baby. So what do? You start signing documents with the doctor. Now this is the same guy that is willing to perform abortions and all kinds of acts. Not each particular doctor, but of the people of the doctor's profession are willing to do many different things to the human body. So when it comes to writing papers, I guess you're kind of even further set apart from that. We think these people are really caring about us, and when we come down to the truth of it and the reality of it, they're not really concerned so much for ourselves. I'm sure a lot of them get into the career for that aspect because they really do care. But again, just like most everybody else, they become indoctrinated by the things that they don't know of. And one of those things, again, is the financial system. And so they go around performing various different duties and tasks. And this is the start of the fraud. Because like I said, the Social Security Act itself is a cooperative agreement between the states and the federal government. And that cooperative agreement is dependent upon a reward from one party to another with the involvement of the government. And so we have a corporate state that is getting a reward from the federal government. And what are they getting that reward for? They're getting that reward for establishing a Social Security account through the birth certificates and all those documents they're providing when you go to the hospital to have a baby. And the function of this entire thing is so that throughout your life, you've got a job and you're making contributions. Remember my last video we spoke about trade or business. In trade or business, it is in reference to a public office. And when we talk about the trade or business, that's something that the government here, each state government, is procuring funds through their own trade and business. They're acquisitioning funds. And those funds that they're acquisitioning are Federal Reserve notes that are established upon the Social Security account that is opened with the Federal Reserve Bank for Federal Reserve use. Now, the federal government is granted use by the Federal Reserve of Federal Reserve notes for its treasury. Now, like I said, the federal government has a cooperative agreement with each of the 50 states to procure those funds, and they're procuring them through your contributions. They're procuring those funds through your contributions and through the contracts that you provide the state that give them the presumption of financial transactions seeking economic substance. So when we think about these, every time you sign a document, you're creating a financial instrument. And that's what they're procuring, because who are you handing it over to? Most oftentimes you're you're handing it over to a government official of some sort. You go down to the courthouse and you file all these papers. You're handing them over to government people. You go to the hospital. You're filing these papers. You're registering your baby and everything. You're giving them to government officials. That hospital is a military institution, people. You're handing them over to a military government in a cooperative agreement your own self. You're rewarding the federal government by not knowing. When you learn this stuff, then you can start asserting it. Make sure, however, you assert it properly. Make sure you know what you're talking about, because otherwise they will screw you up. I've got a young fellow that went and had a baby at a hospital and was able to walk out of the hospital without having to sign any documents. However, he negated to follow up on that and establish his private entity so that they wouldn't come after him for child support on other children that he already had. So I believe he's still currently sitting in jail on that. We're trying to get that figured out for him, but I haven't heard any word back from him for a while. So make sure you comprehend what these cooperative agreements and contracts are. When you deal with a contract, you're signing you're giving a wet ink signature yourself, and in exchange of performances, services, goods, whatever. A cooperative agreement is a reward from the government to another party. It's the difference. And when we see this Social Security Act, we look in there and we see that it's a cooperative, the Title IV defunding is cooperative agreement. Your medical insurances, like I said, that's a military institution. When you're born in a hospital, that's a military institution. And every document that they establish through that institution is a military document. You realize that? That's a military document. And they use it militarily. They use it for the census. And what's a census for? It's of national importance. And what protects the nation? The military. And so when we talk about this Social Security Act, it's a cooperative agreement. What kind of cooperative agreement is it? It's a cooperative agreement for risk assessment, for risk management. Insurance. That's the pretense of it all. That's the pretense of your entire commercial system is insurances. And yes, Justin, they got Turtle. I believe it's Michigan. And this was a few months back. He knew they were coming after him. I told him he needed to establish his documentation to show that those are his heirs and not the state's property. And you know, this is why I say when you start doing this stuff, make sure you know what you're doing first. He was trying to take care of tax issues and stuff like that and rebut child support without establishing first that he got a private membership association set up. If you try to rebut child support without setting this stuff up, you might be able to get by with it. But everything is going to be much easier if you first establish your private membership association. I think that's the sole reason that we have a issue with the case that I'm helping out with in Illinois in regards to child support, is that we don't have a PMA set up for him yet, so we're having this long drawn-out battle. I'm just now currently getting my own PMA set up, and it's been 3-4 years now since I've been studying this stuff. But in the meantime, I don't go confronting them. If they confront me, I give them the truth, and they've had a hard time dealing with that. Of course, that's only because the DA put a protection order out against me. But again, I want you people to think about this stuff. This is that when you go have your child at the hospital, you're entering into a military realm. You know, the Amish don't have birth certificates. Why? because they prefer not to contract or have cooperative agreements with a military force. They know that they're being looked after. They're being protected by their Father in heaven, so they don't need an army to protect them. See, they don't comprehend those kind of borders. So we have to think about this stuff and realize it's all fraud, and it's all based on insurances to protect you in your older life while they rape you while you live. Because that's all it is. It's a pure, total cooperative agreement between the United States federal government and each state government. That's all it is. You're not required to participate. It's a cooperative agreement of a public office. And remember, like I said earlier, I spoke about trade or business in my last couple videos in regards to the driver's license and certification, certificate of title, registration of automobile, and all that. That's specifically intended for trade or business. Now, trade or business is a public office, and these public offices we have are established as military offices to protect this nation on a military basis. And so they provide you insurances, welfare, all this stuff, along with a nice Bill of Rights. But if you don't know how to use it, they'll use it against you. Yes, premeditated crimes against us. And that's why I say these doctors, you think that they're out there for your health, and they're not. They're out there because they got into it because they wanted to help you. They don't understand the financial aspect of what's going on in regards to the birth certificates and all that. And they're working for a military institution. And their only concern is they want to help people with their health. If you're going to be a doctor in this society and working in a military venue for a government, you better comprehend that military venue for the government is seeking Federal Reserve notes from every inhabitant. They're trying to get them convinced that we belong in that military system when we don't. And the Amish prove this. The Mennonites prove this. There are many religious Christian or spiritual organizations around the world that operate by themselves without participation in the government. And this is what we need to get back to. We need to let this government know that we don't want your military protection at home for our children if it's going to be to rape us. You know, this is the whole premise of what America is about, is cooperative agreements. Cooperating. And I don't know what people think about the context of that word there, that term. It's cooperate. And when we talk about driver's license, an operator is somebody that's performing commerce. And here we are talking about doctors who operate. Are they performing commerce? Yes. So we have to think about this. And remember, again, we don't have... I did a video last year about rights and responsibilities. You don't have rights. You have a responsibility. And if you're not going to take care of your responsibilities, then your rights are going to go by the wayside because you don't know them. If you don't know that your rights are a responsibility that you have to uphold yourself, ain't nobody else going to uphold them for you. That doctor that wants to take care of your health, he wants to take care of your health. He really does. But he doesn't know how to. Because while he's taking care of your health, he's enslaving you. And that's not healthy. He's part of the enslavement, and you're part of the enslavement. If you're really concerned about your health, then you need to be responsible for your health in all aspects. Are you living healthy financially? Are you living healthy educational-wise, information-wise? Are you living healthy physical-wise? Are you living healthy spiritually? These are all things, different aspects of health that you have to take into consideration. And if you're going to take your car into a car wash with the windows down, um, may not be too healthy for you. So you got to really think about this stuff. When you're going to these hospitals, if you're going in with your awareness down, it may not be too healthy for you. People really need to start thinking about these agreements that they're making, whether they're cooperative agreements or contracts. You need to comprehend how they operate, what your duties are in those, what your rights are. All of this stuff is very important in regards to our future generations. If you're going to keep signing our children up when you know that the Social Security Administration is fraud, and we've known this for decades. I knew Social Security Administration was a fraud when I was a kid, and everybody complained about it, including my mother, and my mother worked for them. My mother worked for Social Security Administration for 27 years, knew it didn't operate right, yet she continued working for them, and everybody else in the world complained about it, and therefore I knew it wasn't any good. Granted, I got a Social Security account, but I didn't put much stock into it, and I learned as much as I could about it. And upon realizing that Social Security isn't required, then how could it be required to be taken out of your paycheck? It's not. It's a contribution. You're convinced that you're required to do it, and so you do it because otherwise you can't get a job, because your employer is convinced that he's required to do it too, and he's not. He's been fooled just as much as the rest of us. You go out and you open a small business. You're in this fight, and you realize that it's all fraud, but you want to go out and start a small business, and so you go out and the first thing you do is you get a business license. What's a business license? A business license is a DBA, doing business as. You have permission from a state to do business as. Why are you asking permission from a state to do business as, and when you comprehend that you're contracting with them who is committing the fraud and convincing you that you have to be involved in that fraud in order to have your business? And I've explained this before. If you're going to do a DBA, then you're contracting with them to do business the way they tell you to. If you have an international business corporation, you're chartered to do business on a contract on the international sales of goods basis, just like any other nation. When you do a DBA, that's a public privilege. To operate a business, doing business as this name, this person, this public person within their public system. If you do an IBC, an International Business Corporation, boom. So think about this stuff and really comprehend what you're getting involved in. Is it an agreement of any sort? And if it's an agreement, is it a contract where both parties are giving a wet hand signature? Or is it a cooperative agreement that other people are following and abiding by because their employment requires it? And then their regulations exemplify to them what they're supposed to do as a contractor with a public office in trade or business. But that's on the cooperative agreement side. But when it comes to the general public is what we're called. When somebody from the private side comes in and wants to perform a contract with you, that's a different transaction. It's not a series of the same transactions. See, the series of transactions in that cooperative agreement are the cooperative agreement transactions. When you get onto the other side, that's a different set of transactions. And those are known as contracts if there are two wet ink signatures. If you're not getting that second contract or that second signature, are you involved in the cooperative agreement? Are you being convinced that you have to? Do you know how to clarify that you're not? Do you know how to clarify that you're not a part of this private member association known as a corporate government? And it is a private membership association. You have to have an oath of allegiance as a member. That's what makes you a member. If you have never taken an oath of allegiance, then, and believe you me, standing in a classroom taking an oath to the flag, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. No, that's not an oath. First of all, you're a child. You're a minor. You can't take an oath. You can't pledge allegiance. That was all preparation. That was all military preparation. Think about this stuff, people. Think about the documents that you're signing and realize that every last one of them is potentially a financial instrument. If they portray it as a financial instrument, such as a contract, then it has to have 2 wet ink signatures. If it's not, then it's simply a cooperative agreement between other parties that is being performed in fraud against yourself by convincing through false and misleading statements or misrepresentations that you are required to do so. When anybody says that you're required to have a driver license, that's a false statement. You are not required to have a driver license unless you intend to complete the entire phase, the entire series of transactions in a lease agreement, starting with registration and including insurance and a license to perform commerce. What is that driver license? That is a license to perform commerce specifically on the roadways, and it's in a motor vehicle, and it's for at least 50% of the use of that motor vehicle, specifically for trade or business. And when you look up the definition of trade or business, it's the performances of a public office. If you're not in a public office and you don't wish to contract with that public office, and you don't wish to cooperatively agree with that public office, then you don't have to. How do you go about making them stop taking out Social Security? You have to administrate yourself. You have to have a private membership association established. And that means you have to be able to speak it. You have to be able to gather the information that shows that you are a foreign state. You are not part of the United States. You are not part of the corporate states. You are not involved in the cooperative agreements. You are not involved in the cooperative agreements of Social Security. You are not involved in the cooperative agreements of public offices. You are not involved in the cooperative agreements of a monopolized treasury. You are not in the cooperative agreement of a internal revenue service. You don't. I'm sorry. I've been told everything is given freely, and just because you have this commercial system that implies that I have to operate within it doesn't mean that I have to. That's a cooperative agreement between you and your forefathers and whoever else signed those documents. I've never once signed one of those documents, including the original document called the Statement of Live Birth from the hospital that instigated all of this. Therefore, any signature that I've given my entire life was done in fraud to begin with. Period. All based on a financial system of cooperative agreements. This is why Canada steps out from the International Monetary Fund to establish their own monetary system, and there's no detriment on either side. Canada backs out from the IMF. Do they owe the IMF anything? No. Why not? Because it has no intrinsic value. There's no substantive value used to back up their paperwork. It's just words that they said, and there's nothing to substantiate them at all except them saying them. So is there any detriment to the IMF if they back out from an agreement with Canada? No. All they lose out is future business. And that's not a loss. That's just an expectation of what they might be able to convince others to do in the future. You know, agreements. Well, I don't agree with none of it. I think it's all fraud. I think every last bit of it's fraud. That Federal Reserve note. Remember I was talking about that Federal Reserve note and how it's has absolutely zero intrinsic value. Hey Matthew, recognize that? Can you tell me, Matthew, Matt Langston, is this backed by substance? You recognize that, don't you? It says right on it, Canada. There's the old girl herself. Look at that strip. See that nice shiny strip on that side? And the nice shiny strip on this side? And there you can even see part of that watermark. See that watermark right there? She's upside down. Only because I've got her upside down. But there she is again. There's old girl on the watermark. Is that worth more than a Federal Reserve note? Think about this. Who are you doing business with? Who's backing it up? Is your government backing that up with gold? Matt? Has Canada retrieved its gold so that it can back its currency? Or is it backing its currency with the import goods? You know, that's how Gaddafi worked it. You know, they went over and killed him in Libya. Yeah, he was exporting his commodities. His internal commodities from his country. He was exporting them. And he got tired of receiving paperwork that had no value in exchange for his substance that did have value. Hell, the rest of the world's crying out for it. Yeah, Matt just made a perfect statement or a note here. It's an old $20 bill. This is the old style. Maybe I can find a new style. But Canada removed itself from the IMF as far as I know. And they now have their own currency system. And I would much rather have something like this that is backed by some kind of substance other than a foreign entity. Canada would be willing to go to war if you tried saying their dollars weren't backed up. Who's going to go to war if you say the IMF can't back their shit up? The IMF? Fuck no, the IMF is the one that's sending all these other countries to war. So when Canada steps up and retracts from the IMF and starts establishing their own currency, they've got their own commodities that they're setting up to back that currency up. Whereas right now with the federal government here in America, we've got a cooperative agreement through federal regulations and state statutes that say we need a procurement and acquisition system to get these funds back, because they're not backed by any substance. So think about this stuff, people, and realize that the Social Security Administration is total fraud because it's based upon a cooperative agreement between government entities. The federal government giving each state a reward for collecting Federal Reserve notes and through contributions, and then depositing them in the public fund. And therefore, the federal government rewards each state by those deposits by matching those deposits. That's the reward. So think about this stuff and realize what you're doing when you sign any document or make any kind of agreement whatsoever. Know what kind of agreement it is, what kind of qualifications they need to finalize that agreement, and make sure you damn well better know who you are making the agreement with and who they are identifying yourself as. If they're identifying yourself as that person, then make sure that you qualify that signature so that they know that the person is the one that's liable. The person is the debtor, and that you, as the authorized representative giving the authorized signature, is not liable. And that's stated clearly in their codes. And you know why you're not liable? Because it's fraud. Period. Plain and simple. If a Federal Reserve note was any good, and we all know that it's a promissory note, it would have certain things on it that you could do to instruct you on what you could do to exchange it for its promise. But see, it has no place for you to put your signature so you can tender it for accord and satisfaction. So even in our own uniform commercial codes through the state commercial codes, which is the UCC, even that says that the Federal Reserve notes have no value because no one's liable. No one's liable on any other instrument. The authorized representative that's signing on that instrument is not liable. That tells us it's fraud. So think about this stuff, people, and comprehend when you start signing any kind of paperwork whatsoever. It has a financial interest into it. Somebody is seeking economic substance. It doesn't have any true value yourself unless you put it in there. And you only put it there because you've been coerced or misled. When you learn this information, you can rebut it instantly. When that officer pulls you over because you're traveling around without any plates whatsoever, never mind establishing private property plates, you're not even required to do that. That's just a courtesy. So that if a nice policy officer pulls you over alongside the road and you've got no plates on there, and he comes up and says, driver's license, registration, and insurance, please. Well, I'm sorry. I thought maybe you comprehended through the conveyance that I don't participate. I don't agree with your cooperative agreements or your contracts. Therefore, I don't participate. That officer's going to look at you pretty stupid, and he's probably going to want to write you a ticket. He's probably going to want to yank you out of the car and arrest you. And that's likely what he's going to do if you don't know how to back it up. And even if you do know how to back it up, the cocksucker's probably still going to do it. So when you end up, and you got a phone call to make, you better know who you need to call. Or you better be prepared to sit there so that when you get in front of that clown, You can explain this stuff to him. And granted, even myself, if I ended up in front of a court out here, I could explain it to them all I wanted, and they're probably still going to hold me just like everybody else. I'm no better than anybody else, and just because I've gotten away with it for the last 4 years, as well as multiple accounts before that, signing UCC 1-308 and then just never showing up in court, there's a lot that I've been able to perceive and portray in the past 7-8 years that have taught me a lot. But that doesn't mean I'm going to that it's going to protect me. No amount of insurance, no amount of surety bondage could protect me from somebody else's fraudulent and misled acts. If I hold up a silver surety bond in front of that officer and tell him you're in trouble, is he going to believe me? No, he probably doesn't know a first thing about it, and he's just going to do what he's told. And I ain't the one to tell him what to do. I'm not the one he has a cooperative agreement with. I'm not the one he has a contract with. So we have to think about this stuff and realize the differences and where they apply. So again, when you get involved in these agreements, make sure you know whether it's a cooperative agreement, whether it's a contract, who is signing, who they are signing for, who they are defining yourself as, and get your PMA set up and established so that you can carry that with you, and that's all the proof anybody ever needs of anything. So that when that nice policy officer pulls you over, you can present him with your PMA documents, and if he insists on arresting you, you keep that paperwork with you. Those are your legal, lawful documents. You are allowed possession of those. You can take them to jail with you. They cannot keep them from you. That is your lawful documents. And that is why when you have when you get to that facility where they've got you locked up and you've got a call to make, you don't call a lawyer. You call the person that has a second copy of your PMA, so they can get a copy of that PMA, give you another copy of your PMA, so that you can establish that on and for the record in your property records at the jail. Otherwise, a lot of these guys will refuse to let you to take that paperwork in there. Simply, again, because they don't know any better. They're violating you, they're trespassing you, and they don't know. They're caught up in the indoctrinated cognitive dissonance just as well as you are. Like I said, the doctors, the police, even a lot of the lawyers, even some of the judges, some of the lower judges. I've had experience where I've gone into these courts and tested them. You go into court, and they're always telling you, take your hat off, sir. Take your hat off, sir. Sorry, I'm okay. I like my hat. I'm good. I'm all right. And so when I do this, and I've done it a few times, they tell you to remove your hat. And depending on what level of judge they are, how much experience they've got, will determine how they react. And I've had reactions from, when they ask me to remove my hat, and I say, no thanks, I don't want to. And they say, oh, okay. And then they just start proceeding. And I sit there in court with my hat on. I never got arrested. All the way to the next extreme, where the guy that professes that he's going to call the sheriff, oh no, I should be afraid. All the rest of the people in the courtroom watching, oh my God, they're coming to arrest him. Sheriff gets there, do you want me to remand him into custody? No, just remove him from my courtroom. Because that's all they can do. So think about this stuff, educate yourself. Matt asked PMA, Private Member Association. You have your First Amendment right to private members, your private right of association. You have a right to associate with those that you wish to associate with. You have a right to not associate with those that you do not wish to associate with. Now, in that sense, in these instances when we're going to the hospital and we're having a baby, we have a right to associate with that hospital for the safety of our baby because we don't have anybody to deliver it. That's a cooperative agreement. Because that doctor isn't going to sign that paper for you. That doctor isn't going to sign that registration paper. You're going to walk into the hospital and nurses on the counter is going to hand you a registration paper. That doctor didn't sign it. They're going to hand you a blank paper and you're going to be the first one to sign it. Who do you think's going to sign that? Sign it again? Give the second signature. No one. They're only going to bring that paperwork forward and show you, see, you signed this paper, so you got to sign this paper. That ain't the way it works, people. Remember what I said? You're not liable. The person giving the one giving the authorized representative giving an unambiguous authorized signature on the instrument is not liable for the person named in the instrument. So anytime you give a signature, you're not liable. Period. But that doesn't mean you should just go freely, willingly signing shit either. When you do sign, you need to make sure you know what you're signing so that you can comprehend what the implications and presumptions and assumptions are so you can better determine what the outcome might be. Because I guarantee you, if you go in there, sign into a hospital, signing them registration papers, the outcome is going to be that they're going to threaten to take that baby from you if you don't sign more papers. So again, when you go into these hospitals, know what you're doing. Know that it's a cooperative agreement to start with. You do not have to contract. And when you start signing papers, you don't have to keep signing papers. Once you're done having your baby and your baby is healthy and they've acknowledged this and it's time to go home, you don't have to sign discharge papers. What's that? Discharge. Gee, don't people get discharged from prison? Don't people get discharged from jail? The last time I got discharged, I was discharged from jail, and they wanted me to sign release papers. Now, wait a minute. I just discharged. Now you want me to release myself. I don't think so. So think about this stuff, people. When they discharge you, they're discharging. The charge is gone now. It's done. How do you discharge a hospital bill? A lot of people up in arms about that, trying to figure out how to offset their bills. That's what a discharge is. They charge you, now you want to discharge it. So think about this stuff and comprehend cooperative agreement of the Social Security Act is fraud. It's between government officials only. That's it. Pure and simple. It's a cooperative agreement, and it is not. It has no congressional conference of right of enforcement. Period. It establishes its purpose is to the purpose of the Social Security Act within it states its purpose is to establish a Social Security board to raise revenue. Why are they raising revenue? Because they have a cooperative agreement with the federal government that the revenue they raise and deposit within the public fund will have matching funds deposited into that public fund. And what is that public fund? That public fund is for public officials holding public offices for their retirements. And it's all done on contributions. Federal Income Contributions Act. Federal Insurance Contributions Act. You'll see that on every paycheck. FICA, FICA. Federal Insurance Contributions Act. What is federal insurance? Social Security. And why are you required to pay Social Security as Social Security and FICA? Because they're qualifying you as a Medicare qualified government employee, and as such you will be treated for taxation purposes as a government employee. For benefit purposes, however, you are not treated as a government employee, you are treated as an old age pensioner. Contract law is the highest law of the land. Nope. Nope. Wrong. Law of nature is the highest law of the land. And that's simply because you cannot avoid it. If you go outside and it's raining, you cannot stop raining. You cannot put an estoppel on rain. You cannot put an estoppel on wind. You cannot put an estoppel on the sand dust devils. As you're driving down the roadway in Texas and you see dust, you can't put an estoppel on the weather. You can't put an estoppel on the bear that's crossing the road in Canada. You can't put an estoppel on anything through law. All you can do is act naturally yourself and either avoid it or interact with it. Period. Contract, you have a choice. And I got into a discussion. David L. just says common law. Common law is only paramount to the local community. You know, when people think about common law, they think common law around the world. Common law comes from your local community. It's what's common in your local area. It's what's customary to your area. And remember, we spoke about habit yesterday in my yesterday's video, habit. And where does that come from? Habit is somebody's customary clothing. That's what's habit. Because, see, today, we get up in the morning and we change clothes. When people were first establishing themselves on earth, they didn't have a change of clothes for every day of the week. So what they have? They had this leather garment that they made, or this hide that they used to make a garment. And it was a habit to wear it every day. And it was habit to be recognized within each clan even by the garment you wore. The king or the big guy of the clan might have wore the big bear hide, whereas a little girl in the clan might have wore a little thin deer hide. And so they could recognize each other by habit. Because they didn't have a name to call them by. They had a habit. They had a habit of recognizing each other by what they looked like. What they visually perceived. There wasn't a verbal language to perceive them by. So common law, even itself, has changed over time. Contract law has changed over time. Law of nature remains the same. It's a set of cycles and balances that you can never screw up. It will be eternal. Period. Just the way it is. So think about this stuff, people, and realize Social Security Administration is a cooperative agreement between the federal government and the states to procure funds from yourself on a voluntary contribution basis while convincing you that you have to. Ouch! Anyway, remember, if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be doing this. God bless. Have a great night. Love ya. Bye.